I would like to call this meeting to order. This is the December 2020 Board Reorganization meeting for the Upper Dublin School District. If everyone could please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance, I would appreciate it. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Ms. Evans, would you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Dr. Davis.
Present.
Mr. Henderson.
Present.
Ms. Ionity.
Present.
Dr. Levinowitz.
Present.
Mr. Rapsky.
Present.
Ms. Sherpier.
Present.
Mr. Sirota.
Present.
Mr. Wallach.
Present.
Ms. Franczyk.
Her video has gone as well, so I think we may have briefly lost her.
Ms. Franczyk.
Just give her a second here to see if she logs back in.
Yeah.
I see her video again now.
There she is.
My apologies, a very poor time for my internet to go down. I apologize. So please tell me where we are in the agenda, if you would.
Ms. Evans just called you for roll call.
I am now here, present.
Thank
So sorry.
you. All present. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, next on the agenda is the nomination and election of a temporary board president. Are there any nominations for the office of temporary board president?
Yes, I'd like to nominate Mr. Mark Sirota.
Are there any other nominations? Okay, if not, is there a motion to close the nominations?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor of closing nominations, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, please say nay. Okay, since there is only one nomination, all in favor of Mr. Mark Sirota for temporary board president, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. All right, thank you, Mr. Sirota. It's all yours.
All right, thank you. So next on the agenda is community input on tonight's topics, which are the election of officers and setting the calendar of legislative meetings. If anyone would like to address the board on those topics, please raise your virtual hand. Just give that, I see none, but I'll give that just another moment. The raise hand button is down near the bottom of the screen. All right, seeing none, I will close community input and I will take nominations for the election of board president. Are there any nominations for the office of board president?
Yes, I would like to nominate Dr. Darlene Davis.
Are there any other nominations? Okay, is there a motion to close nominations?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Franczyk. Second.
Second.
All right, thanks, Jeff. All in favor of closing nominations, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Okay, so let's vote on, there's only one nomination, so all in favor of Dr. Davis for board president, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, please say nay. Congratulations, Dr. Davis. It's all yours.
Thank you. Before I start, I just want to thank everyone for trusting me with the responsibility of being the board president, and I look forward to our continued work as the team of 10. I also want to thank Ms. Franczyk as the outgoing president, and I know that she will be right there when I have questions, and I'm already appreciating that. Next on the agenda is the nomination and election of vice president. Are there any nominations for the office of board vice president?
I would like to nominate Jeff Wallach.
Are there any other nominations? If not, is there a motion to close nominations?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor of closing nominations, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Since there's only one nomination, all in favor of Mr. Jeff Wallach for vice president, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. Congratulations and thank you to Mr. Wallach for your willingness to serve as our vice president.
Thank you,
Next
Dr.
on-
Davis.
You're welcome. Next on the agenda is the nomination and election of the assistant secretary. Are there any nominations for the office of assistant secretary?
Yes, I'd like to nominate Ms. Brooke Evans.
Are there any other nominations? If not, is there a motion to close nominations?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor of closing nominations, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. Hearing none, nominations are now closed. Since there's only one nomination, all in favor of Ms. Evans for assistant secretary, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, please say nay. Hearing none, congratulations, Ms. Evans. At this time, we're going to continue on with the agenda as it was presented in board docs. Item J, we have other business recommendations. Mr. Wallach, can you take that?
Certainly, Dr. Davis. Thank you very much. There's one item tonight. It is to approve the legislative meeting dates for the 2021 calendar year. They are listed in the agenda item. You will see that there's a legislative meeting for each month with the exception of July, when there typically is not a meeting, but there can be if one needs to be called. And there's not one for December in that this process will happen again at the reorganization meeting in December. So I'll make a motion to approve the legislative meeting dates set forth in the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. Thank you very much, Mr. Wallach. At this point, we are up to our second community input. As usual, please state your name and where you reside in the township and raise your virtual hand. Ms. Evans will allow you to speak and use the timer as well. Is there any public comment?
I don't see any virtual hands.
Okay, give another second. Okay, seeing none, we'll close our community input. Next, we will invite comments from board members. If anyone has anything to say. Oh, I see Ms. Francis' hand.
Yes, I just would like to both thank and congratulate you, Dr. Davis, Mr. Wallach, on your new roles. And I want to extend a very hearty thank you to each and every one of you on the team of 10. To you in particular, Dr. Davis and Dr. Yanni. We have sure spent a lot of time together in the last year, perhaps much more so than we expected. And I certainly could not have served in this role without that support. I should acknowledge also my husband and my children, who also made sacrifices for this work to happen. I was expecting, as I've told Dr. Yanni a number of times, a year of smooth sailing because we had such a good thing going, and Dr. Yanni has been such a great asset to the district, and certainly could never have seen COVID coming. But I've learned a great deal. I've learned a great deal from all of you, including the executive leadership team of the district. And I just want to say thank you for allowing me this opportunity. And I know we're going to do great things again together this year coming up. So thank you all.
Thank you, Ms. Franczyk. Are there any other board members that would like to speak? Mr. Wallach?
Thank you, Dr. Davis. I just wanted to echo the sentiments you had said earlier, to thank Ms. Franczyk for her leadership in this past year. It's been a very different year, and her leadership as board president with you, Dr. Davis, at her right side was instrumental, and speaks volumes as to you know, the greatness of this board and the school district and this community. And I just want to thank Ms. Franczyk for extreme leadership in a very trying year for all of us. And I also want to thank the board for their support of me in the position of vice president. I look very much forward to working with Dr. Davis and the rest of the board, the entire leadership team, and the community this year going forward. Thanks much.
Thank you. Are there any other board members that would like to comment? If not, Dr. Yanni, would you like to make any comments at this time?
Thank you, Dr. Davis, and congratulations to you and to Mr. Wallach for being elected into board leadership positions. And a thank you to Mrs. Franczyk for her leadership and support over the last year. I look forward to continuing to work with the board, hopefully for a less tumultuous year ahead. Hopefully we will soon be on the downside or the other side of the pandemic, and we can start to get back to business as usual. But again, Dr. Davis and Mr. Wallach, congratulations, and Mrs. Franczyk, thank you for your leadership.
Okay, at this time, I would like to just make everyone aware of our upcoming meetings. Following this reorganization meeting, we will have our education committee meeting. We invite everyone to stay and attend that meeting. On Wednesday, December 16th, we have our finance meeting, and our next legislative meeting will be on Monday, December 21st. We'll continue to monitor our COVID environment, and hopefully sometime in the near future we'll actually be able to meet in person, but we'll make you aware of when that will occur. Dr. Yanni, would you like to make any announcements regarding Sunshine?
We have no Sunshine announcements this evening, Dr. Davis.
Okay, great. All right. It is 6:14 and the reorganization meeting is now adjourned. Thank you everyone for your attendance and participation.
Thank you.
We'll see everyone at the education meeting.
All right.
All right, good evening. This is December 2nd, the Education Committee meeting. With me is the full board and a number of the members, or all members of the executive leadership team. We have a couple of items on the agenda, 3 presentations, and then a discussion. I think we are good to go. Dr. Yanni, do you have any announcements or communications?
Yes, when we do the presentations tonight, presentation 5A and 5B are actually together. 5C will just be some brief updates. And when we get to that, we will talk about the information from the legislative update and how it may or may not impact the representational consent item on the agenda for approval this evening as well. But there are no other announcements for this evening.
All right, thank you. So then we have a set of minutes from the November 4th meeting. So is there a motion to approve the minutes of November 4th education meeting?
So moved.
And is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. So all in favor of approval, say aye.
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 Any against? Okay, then we move, then the motion is approved. And we can move on to the presentations.
Yes,
All right.
I'm ready. Good evening, everybody. We have a presentation. Mrs. Evans, if you go to the next slide. Yes, so we're going to begin our presentation this evening with Mr. Chris Hayden sharing some information with us. He's a math teacher at the high school, also does some club work at the middle school, a parent in the district, married to an amazing teacher in the district, and he teaches our computer science classes, and we'll be sharing with you some information about that course, about, I'm sure, how it's grown, but really how we've been using Code HS. I believe, Mr. Hayden, we began it last year, and this year we went for it in terms of adopting the school version of that through support from the CARES Fund. And he'll share with that. We'll take some questions right after Mr. Hayden's presentation, and then we can allow him to head out after that. And then Ms. Penner and I will pick up with 3 additional topics: the Cardinal Academy updates, updates on assessment and grading, and then an update on curriculum review and the K12 writing framework. Okay, so without further ado, next slide, I believe, is our 4 pillars of practice that we continue to focus on as we make decisions and put these presentations together. So the next slide will take us to Mr. Hayden's presentation. Mr. Hayden, thank you for being with us tonight.
Just give me a moment to get this.
Hello, everyone. This is Chris Hayden here with a quick little video about some of the benefits of Code HS. Code HS is what we are using now for our computer science courses at the high school. So Code HS is sort of a learning management system specific for computer science courses. But more than that, it also offers content that you can use in the various courses. There's a lot of content that has been created already by the people who have created this platform. But as the teacher, you can also add to it. You can switch things around. You can remove content if you want. One of the great things about Code HS is that we can use it for all of the courses, and the students can do all of their coding using the Chromebook, all of their coding online using the Code HS website. They offer a sandbox feature. Basically, you can just create your own programs. And they offer a variety of options. But this allows the students to basically code in any of those programming languages they want at any time. And they have as much room as they want to make as many programs as they would like. So what you're looking at right now is the assignment page for the AP Computer Science A course. And within any one of these units, like the array unit, it has several sections, and each section has several activities. And almost every single section has a video, check for understanding sort of mini quiz, examples of code that involves that concept, and then exercises related to that concept where the students are finishing a program, for the most part. Like I said, you can also add your own content. So this is a project that I created, and you have some information, and then you have a spot where the students are going to type up their code as you want. You can give them some starter code. And in terms of configuring it, one of the nice things is you can do copy paste prevention. This is one way to help sort of prevent students sharing code and just copying it in and trying to pass it off as their own. And in terms of checking progress, this is for the Python course, and you can go to any unit you want. You can go to all modules or one particular unit, and the various activities are listed up here, and the colors here. The green means it's completely done. That activity is completely done. The yellow indicates that the student started that particular activity but didn't finish it. And if there's anything that shows up as gray, that means the student didn't start it. So it gives me a quick look to see, all right, what are the students struggling with? I can click on a particular activity that a student hasn't finished yet. I can open it up and see what their program is doing thus far. Yeah, okay, so this is supposed to create like a little, series of boxes on the perimeter, and this is not quite done. I can type in here myself and see if I can sort of fix it, and the student won't see what I typed in, but then I can share my suggestions with the students. Say, hey, you know what, on line 19, we need to add this in, or maybe on line 7, you might want to rethink that line of code. But I can, as every time that the student hits run code, it automatically saves their work. And then I'll be able to see whatever their work looks like after the most recent save. So it's not real time, but it's close to real time access in terms of what the students are doing. Of course, it makes it that much easier for me to see what students are doing during class. I can check to see if they are actually working on the assignment during class, or if they're not. I can see how much time they're working on it during class or outside of class. All of that can be tracked.
All right, Mr. Hayden, anything you want to add or provide some context or share with us about how it's going this year, some student feedback, et cetera?
Well, we started, can you hear me now? Okay, great. So we started with CodeHS. Phil Vinogradov suggested it in like February because we were sort of tied to our desktop computers, especially with Java. We didn't have a way to have the students code and not use the desktops. They couldn't use their Chromebook if they wanted to write code with Java, and that was programming language we used in 2 of our courses. So he recommended it, and then by a weird coincidence, we ended up really needing it once we went virtual. It's been very helpful in terms of tracking student progress. I can see what they're doing at any given time. It's a lot easier for me to give them almost instantaneous feedback. Besides just sharing the screen on the Google Meet, I can actually go into their account at any given time and see what they're doing. So it makes the feedback loop that's just that much easier, much quicker. On a side note, this doesn't really have much to do with CodeHS, but Schoology has been very helpful during this time where we've been virtual. I myself, and I know a lot of my colleagues, have been using Schoology assessments as our testing platform, and it's been, it's not ideal, it's not perfect, but it's been very good in terms of having a way to provide assessments I think the one thing that's lacking is giving feedback through the assessment, but otherwise you can pretty much ask any type of question. You can have students upload files, upload audio. You can highlight images, so I can have students graph on graph paper on the computer, and I can actually, when I grade it, I can play back what they've drawn in, so I can kind of see how the graph was created instead of just seeing the finished product. So so Schoology has been very helpful, but for the 4 computer science courses that we offer now, it's Code HS has been a lifesaver. And now that we don't have any computers in the computer lab at the high school, I think it's going to be critical that we continue this relationship with Code HS as our coding platform for the 4 courses.
Yeah, so one of the things that we were, in the spring, whenever we were looking at budget and, some other pieces, we were at a point where we needed to update, refresh the computer science lab at the high school. But, it's a great lab. It had great computers in it, but it's very stationary, like most labs are. And when that period is over, the student's ability to work stops. And it continues whenever that period comes back again. And so we were really excited to be able to look at Code HS, but also then use some of that money that we were going to use on refreshes to help get a head start on ordering Chromebooks and other resources for this year, which allowed us, as Mr. Hayden said, the crystal ball of being able to distribute many more devices in our students' hands this year, this summer, rather. So that certainly has freed up that space, has allowed for students to collaborate, but there are those features, as Mr. Hayden mentioned, that you can see or restrict some of that collaboration where necessary. One of the things that I was reminded by your presentation, Mr. Hayden, that was similar to Mrs. Kowalski's, was your ability to see what students are doing and the progress that they're making, similar to what you would see in Desmos or Pear Deck or some other resource, so that you're able to check in and give some feedback, individualized feedback, or whole class. If you're doing some of those screen shares, you can see it seems like everyone in line 9 is making the same mistakes. So rather than leaving those comments, we can bring the class back together here. What has been some of the feedback from students that you've received on this?
Well, in terms of Code HS, I think they appreciate the fact that I can give them feedback a lot quicker than I could have before when we were using something like Eclipse, which was a nice free compiler, but they would have to email me their code. I would have to run it on my machine. It just took so much longer for them to get the feedback, and sometimes they'd be using a slightly different compiler than what I was using. So something that might have worked on their machine wasn't working on mine, or vice versa. So the feedback loop, the fact that I can give them more instantaneous feedback is something they really appreciate. They appreciate the fact that it's easier for them to see what they've done, what they haven't done. I will say that they like, in terms of debugging, they like the older compiler better because it was very, it just told them, like, you are missing a semicolon right here. So that the compiler with Code HS, it kind of said, you have an error, maybe on this line, maybe on the line above. Whereas so with the JCreator or Eclipse, it was very specific, like, you need to put a period here. So it kind of maybe saved them from some thinking. Now I like the new compiler because it doesn't kind of hold their hand as much, so yeah, so that's been the feedback that I've gotten from them.
Great, thank you. Any questions from the board for Mr. Hayden?
I'm not sure if it's a question so much for Mr. Hayden or from a budget perspective, do we pay by student for this? Is this a by school type of situation?
It's what we have now is called a silver account, which gives one teacher unlimited access for students. And so if Chris manages to get 300 computer science kids, we'll be okay as long as he teaches all of them.
I see. Yeah, I mean, I think to me, this is such an opportunity for, my mind is like kind of starts spinning when I hear about this, because there are going to be kids that want to interact with you, Mr. Hayden, or want to have access to this content that might not be able to get into one of your courses. Certainly, we don't want to add any more work to your plate right now, but, you know, thinking about next year potentially, you know, is there an opportunity for an extracurricular perspective on this, or even some parents who I think we feel a little disjointed from this work? I myself could probably stand to learn some of this. So just food for thought for the future. But this was great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I have a question.
Yes.
So are students able to work at their own pace in this program like this?
Great question. I mean, yes, they can. But if I want to make sure that the students aren't working too far ahead, so we're kind of talking about the same concept, I can toggle between is assigned or is not assigned. But if you wanted to, if you were doing it as an extracurricular, let's say, and you wanted to kind of just give the students free access, you just would need to sign them up and say, all right, go ahead and get started. And, you know, I, as the facilitator, I could help them along any step of the way, no matter where they're at. The only part would be if we wanted to make sure that it was a class that wanted to make sure everybody's working at roughly the same pace, you could unassign something for the time being if you like.
Sounds great. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. I was when I started to see how great this was working, I was thinking that maybe this might be something that would be beneficial for Mr. Doan and Mr. Feliciani down at the middle school, because I know they have computer science down there. I know they focus mainly on Scratch, but again, food for thought, something to think about. Because right now, as Mr. Hoffman said, we just have it for one teacher, me. It'd be nice if we could open up for another teacher.
And that's one of the pieces that we were forward thinking, and then we'll go to Mr. Sirota, when we were looking in the spring for the middle school, because we did as well need to refresh a little bit of that lab, but we're also recognizing, you know, we're 2 years out and really wanting to make sure that we have the best resources available to our students now, but not purchasing something that won't benefit us in the middle school 2 years from now. And so that was a decision that we're in the process of looking through as well. Mr. Sirota?
Thanks. Yeah, that actually segues well into one of my questions, which is, I know right now we're offering classes in 2 programming languages, Java and Python, and the same tool works for both, right? 3, what's the third?
Well, it's App Inventor, MIT App Inventor.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
And does the same tool, is it used for all 3?
Well, there's
App Inventor's kind of native, right?
The MIT App Inventor is not something that's directly tied into CodeHS.
Yeah.
We still use the MIT App Inventor site for that, and we also use a site that's been approved by the College Board called Mobile CSP that has a lot of the curriculum. However, there is a fair amount of activities on CodeHS specific for the principal's course that we could use and incorporate if we wanted to. But right now we're using CodeHS for Computer Science 1, AP Computer Science A, and the Programming with Python course.
Okay, and principles can be done in other languages like Python too, can't it?
Absolutely, yes. It's up to you know, whatever the district decides. Now, you do need to go through the audit process if you plan on changing. But yeah,
Okay. And the middle school, you know, I don't know if you're the right person to answer this, but I know they're, as you said, they're currently using Scratch, which, like App Inventor, is sort of its own environment. So are you suggesting that we would change the middle school curriculum to adapt to this, or?
Well, I mean, thinking ahead kind of down the line, maybe a year or so, I can easily see Python being taught there.
Okay.
It's a nice introductory language, very accessible.
Yep. Okay. And then my last question, is the structure of CodeHS, does it allow for students who are not in one of your classes to use it? You're not currently in one of your classes?
Conceivably, yes. But we currently only have the students who are in the classes who have access to it. But yes, it could be open up to anybody.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure.
And Mr. Hayden and I did have a meeting scheduled for February and then March, and then closure happened. But we were beginning to look at what we can do with K12, because as everyone on the board knows and in the community, Mr. Hayden works with his students with the activity, I forget what it's called, at the elementary schools, Mr. Hayden. The evening.
Well, we ran for the first time last year at Jarretttown. We called it the Jarretttown Coding Club.
Yeah, and so
yeah, and
you have
go ahead.
You have the evenings with the parents, right, at each of the schools.
Family Code Night, yes.
Code nights.
Yeah,
so,
that's on hiatus now.
Yeah, there's a lot of passion and a lot of interest here, and you know, Mrs. Stianchi at Maple Glen just copied me on an email the other day. They participate in the Hour of Code at all levels. That just really starts to introduce that. And so I'm looking forward to some conversations that we can have with Mr. Hayden soon about the K12 program. And that will feed in, Mr. Sirota, to the curriculum review cycle as we look at what the courses are and how they're going and how they're developing and what resources are available. Certainly that's going to shift some of the work and direction as it works through. Ms. Sherpier?
Yeah, real quick, how many students are enrolled currently in the 4 courses?
It's approximately 80.
Okay, and are they? I assume they're not evenly distributed, but a total of 80. And in the middle school, do you know what the numbers are?
I think that all of the students go through it at one point or another.
So
my daughter is in 8th grade. I know she just finished it. I think they go through it 6th, 7th, and 8th grade at some point.
Yeah, no, I think that's, I'm very excited to hear that there is a little bit more emphasis on that, because I think our students benefit greatly from that. The other question I had is, can students take their code outside of CodeHS? So when they're done with the course and say they have developed something they want to put into use outside of their course requirements, can they take it outside? Or is it really embedded inside CodeHS and that's where it stays?
That's a great question. Anything that they develop in the sandbox feature, where they can code in any language they want, assuming that they get the program running the way they would like it, they can just copy and paste that into anything. They can put it into a Google Doc if they want, right, and then later on transfer that over into some other compiler.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hayden. I appreciate your time tonight and appreciate all your good energy for our students. So
My
thank
pleasure.
you very much. Ms. Penner, next slide is Cardinal Academy updates.
Sure. So thanks to Ms. Dunn, we have a new little logo for our elementary Cardinal Academy. We're continuing to meet with the 17 teachers of Cardinal Academy Elementary. Oh, I'm sorry. And support them in their work and growing this as a community. Mr. Hoffman, you're going to have to take it for a second.
Always ready. So we've been working, as the 4 pillars of practice mentioned, that pillar being the positive culture and community building. And so as part of the building community, Ms. Penner just mentioned, Ms. Dunn Thomas Fitz, art teacher, developed this awesome graphic for us that we are beginning to use with our students. And this Friday, we're going to have our first, what the teachers are referencing as Fun Friday. And so the students are going to be joining as a group, all of the Cardinal Academy students at 2 different times on a Zoom call. K2 will meet together, and then 3-5 will meet together later. And their surprise, hopefully no students are listening, but their surprise guests are going to be our 4 elementary principals who are joining to play 2 truths and a lie with the students. So they're developing some slides. They're going to get to know their principals a little bit better and participate and see, you know, the other first graders and second graders from their schools on the screen, and also get to see some of the other classes on that screen. And so we have some plan. We've got a really passionate group of teachers that are working through some creative ideas like this, like bingo and some other ways to just kind of break the ice. Meredith, you ready?
Yep.
Okay.
Thanks. And another thing that we're working on streamlining for both our staff and the families is the way that we are curating and distributing resources. So the students who have chosen to remain virtual for the school year, we're going to continue to need to pick up things, whether they're for encore classes, art supplies, new Eureka math workbooks and guided reading books, different textbooks, and we want to streamline this process. So we're working on some ways from district office that we can support our teachers and also family members so that those pickups can happen from home schools. So it's an ongoing effort here to maintain this community and build a community so that this group feels connected to their home schools, but also feels connected as their own entity. Next slide, Brooke. We wanted to touch base a little bit about elementary progress reports. So the trimester for elementary ends on December 7th, and conferences are going to be scheduled next Thursday and Friday, the 10th and 11th. Similar to the progress reports that we sent home in June, we worked with our teachers to look at the state standards at each grade level and really work on some grade level skill specific language to be able to share with parents which skills they're observing and which skills they're not observing yet. And we're really asking them to think about that growth mindset when they talk to parents about where kids are in that skill development and what they're getting close to and how we're going to support them in that growth. So the conferences will be really those strength-based conversations about skills. They'll be virtual, obviously, and we'll be showing evidence of work samples, whether it's in Seesaw or Google Classroom or in the Google Drives, so that the parents can see exactly what that work looks like. You will be getting copies of those progress reports after conferences. We recognize that a lot of students and staff had brand new students in front of them or a brand new teacher on November 9th. And then we were, unfortunately, all virtual for the last 2 weeks, which was a little unexpected. So some of those teachers have only seen students live for 10 days. So we did extend the window of when we would be sending these home to parents a little bit to give teachers and kids time to get to know each other and to actually teach and gather some more information. So progress reports will be sent via email and hard copies if needed on December 18th.
And in reference to secondary grading, as we've mentioned a few times, we are continuing with our grading practices as normal. So our regular grading system, our reports, our report cards rather, and our teachers are continuing to look at authentic assessments that we can give for our students. So that was a struggle in the spring, if you recall, we mentioned a few times, trying to think how what we typically would have kids do, how does that translate when they're no longer sitting in front of us? Now, our teachers have continued to develop some really strong assessment practices, which really comes down to the idea of it's not an assessment that I can Google the answer to. And so we have, some parents reaching out to us lately saying, my honors child used to really be able to hide behind a test, and she can't do that anymore because they are being asked to create, to think, to develop and to own some of that. The current, I don't want to call it an issue or concern, is now thinking through what that assessment looks like in a blended way at the secondary level, knowing that some students will be in the room, some will not ever be in the room, and some will be in the room every other class session. And so our teachers are really working together during that collaboration time and with their departments to think of some creative approaches here. Next slide, Ms. Evans. Curriculum review cycle. So I've linked there. We're not going to open that today. That is the curriculum review cycle document that shows the 5-year cycle that we began last year. What we ended up doing was initially we froze the years and we're just going to change the 1920 to be 2021, 21, 22, and to just kind of restart. But what we discovered was closure did, in some cases, speed up some of that review, and in some cases it slowed us down a little bit. With F&P, for example, that program took off and expanded K5 very quickly. So what we ended up doing over the summer was updating that chart for this school year where we believe we are right now. And our departments are going to continue to work through that together and our grade levels together. Hopefully you've seen that many of the resources that we are currently using and in many of the ways that the blended learning is asking us to work a little differently, it's naturally making some of that revision happen as we go and some of that reflection happen as we go. I believe by next month, we should have the program of studies presentation when Mrs. Ward comes and presents that information to the board. And so we're in that process as well, preparing for that. K12 writing update. Ms. Penner, do you want to talk a little bit about kind of what we discovered last year on our work with K12 writing?
Sure. So while Fontes and Manila, we've been talking a lot about it in regards to a reading program. It's a comprehensive English language arts program with writing embedded in it. What we're really trying to get teachers to think about is how to embed writing and the skills that they're working on across all content areas and how they connect. So we went to a training at Patton last year, specifically focused on text analysis and responding to text and writing, which on the state test is called the TDAs. And we were really excited when we were sharing with people across the state the work in Upper Dublin and what our teachers are doing to see how ahead of the curve we really are in the text-dependent analysis work. So we're working on using Fontes and Pinnell to continue that work and working with teachers to really align the skills that we're working on K-5 with what they pick up on in 6th grade at the middle school, and then again with that transition from 8th to 9th grade. So we're working with our curriculum supervisor of English language arts, Brina Vandergrift, on this work, and it's going to continue. What we don't want to happen is we don't want people to look for and ask for and rely on a writing program in a box. We don't want writing as a standalone that they stop and start teaching at a specific time each day. We want writing to really be embedded authentically into the instruction throughout the day and throughout all content areas.
So by the end of the school year, we'll be sharing with you, rather later in the spring, we'll be sharing with this committee the vision for Upper Dublin writing and what our practices are under those belief statements, the belief statements about writing, K-12. And that work will be embedded then in all of the curriculum review cycles stages, to look to how we integrate those belief statements into those individual content areas. So we're really excited about that. English has already completed the survey, gave some feedback as well, and we'll be pushing that out to K-12 teachers after the winter holiday. All right, so now we'll open it up. Next slide, I believe, is just the question slide. So questions about any of those topics. Mr. Pierre?
Yeah, I just wanted to get back on the curriculum review. I'm pretty sure that illustrative math was given another year to try things out. What is happening there? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
And we were talking about that a little bit today, actually, because what it is helping us do, the organization of that material is going nicely into the blended learning model, but we were just getting better at implementing those lessons. So I believe that our teachers are still finding success, but as in any situation, when you peel back to that standard or skill, we use the tools that we have in our toolbox. So illustrative really is a different way of thinking about math. But we've given the teachers permission to do what they need to do to help those students as well. So in the spring, we'll have some days where the University of Delaware will be helping our math department again in working through some of that. So we're looking forward to that work with that partnership.
So do you envision another year of pilot, or are you expecting to come to the board at some point with a plan to adapt to the illustrative for the following academic year?
Well, as soon as you heard me say this a lot with FMP as well in the spring, when we have the data to make the recommendation, I want to make that recommendation. So I just want to have more than it seems like our teachers like it or our kids are adapting. I really want to make sure that we have the information that we need, and we're getting that information. I just want to make sure that we have.
Yeah, no, I was curious where that was headed, and also I guess from a budgeting perspective, that could be something that may come up this spring, but it could be another year.
If I could just jump into it, but with a program like Illustrative, one of the things that we've talked at length with our teachers about is that no program that we put in front of teachers represent curriculum. So one of the things that Illustrative does a really nice job with, when we compare all of the commercial products out there, Illustrative really forces kids to think deeply about mathematical concepts. And it does it in non-threatening ways. And it is also a fairly good transition from what we're doing with Eureka at the elementary level. I think if we get to the point where we say we're going to adopt Illustrative secondary wide for all courses, or the courses for which it's appropriate, one of the things that we can never lose sight of is we don't want that to be the sole set of materials that we use with kids. So much like Fountas and Pinnell is a framework, Illustrative Math is a framework, and it allows us to teach standards and skills and concepts, and also enrich and remediate inside core content instead of having to look for places to do that at other times.
Dr. Davis?
Yes, this is a very general question, and maybe not something that you can answer right now. But obviously, we've had so many challenges when we had to, go virtual in the spring, and, starting out virtual in September, and the teachers haven't had a lot of time with those that have come back to in-person instruction. But at the same time, I know they have been gathering data in terms of where our students are. So is there a point in time where you might be able to come back to us and sort of give us an update on where we are, what we need to do to try to maybe fill in holes for kids that were really struggling, not being in front of their teacher, so that we can, sort of make some decisions about what we need to do now and what we need to do in the future.
Yes, absolutely. And as you referenced, we are gathering that information. We have some pretty strong information at our elementary level, particularly around reading that we're working through, as well as math. We are gathering information from secondary schools right now, now that the first marking period is up, to dig into a little bit more about what we saw there, what happened, how that compares to where we were and where we would expect. The story side of the situation is that teachers were actually pleasantly surprised where many of our students were. And I think because what we were forced to do in the spring and what we were forced to do at the beginning of the year was really peel back to those priorities, those building block basic standards for courses. And when we start with the basics and we teach, what we need students to know, we have a really good baseline. Ms. Penner was talking to one of the middle school math teachers a few weeks ago, and and he was saying, it's really clear what my students know right now. I know what they all know, and I know what they can do, and I'm seeing the learning happen in ways, because often, when we're just kind of going through our lessons in a live situation, we're missing, some of those moments for individual kids unintentionally because it's in a notebook, or you saw someone shaking their head and assuming that they wrote down what you wrote down. So it really is exposing some of that to us. So we're happy to report that to you hopefully maybe January, February, a little bit more concrete information.
Great, thank you so much.
Sure. Mr. Wallach?
Thanks, Mr. Hoffman. A quick question on the writing update, and maybe this is more of a question for the spring, but as we look like cross disciplines, will that also be including sciences and STEM areas? And then I guess my subset of that question is, if so, will we be looking at like distinguishing factors between like different types of writing and how that gets embedded? And I guess maybe I come from an old school mindset. Maybe this isn't educationally sound anymore, and you can correct me, but like from an old school perspective, that scientific writing is slightly different than creative writing, which is slightly different than what I'll call formal writing or essay writing. So, and maybe they're all issues for the spring, but I'm just curious on your reactions to that, or Ms. Penner's.
No, you're exactly right.
Sorry, back in March and February, we had, when we were having live professional learning, our English and our social studies departments at the secondary level, under the leadership of Tony Giamarco and Ms. Vandergriff, really were doing that, starting to do that collaborative work across their departments and identifying which writing skills and standards were similar and which ones they could split up, and then really helping teach each other. So that work began, and we're really excited to continue that.
So your words still stand, Mr. Wallach. They still work. As a former English teacher, I always used to say, postmodern literature was like 1950s, and the kids used to say, well, what comes after postmodern? And I said, I don't know. But so those words have stuck over the years. But where we look at it from a K12 perspective is, what is the purpose of the writing that we're doing? Are we writing to explain our understanding? Are we writing to persuade someone? Are we writing to elaborate or to challenge? So when you think of words like that, even in a math class, to justify a response, you would do that in writing. And so that's the language that we're using right now, so that it becomes something of what we do. I've been in districts where interdisciplinary writing and K12 writing really started to go, well, what class is going to take the research paper? And it then became, well, good, the biology teachers are doing it, so now the English teachers don't have to teach research. And when we start to say that, like, what are we doing with writing? And how do you write about literature without using sources? And so we want to get to those belief statements about why we write, how we write, and do we write daily in some way in every single class. And so you're absolutely correct.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Dr. Davis, do you have another question? No?
Actually, just a comment. I do think it is so important that we write across the curriculum, and that we don't create silos. So I'm really excited about the work that you're doing, and I think you all should be commended for it.
Thank you.
One of the things that we often say is writing is thinking, right? And so, we want to get kids beyond any type of phobia they have about writing as well. And so, when writing becomes an arduous task, kids shut down. So we want writing to be such a normative part of our culture that writing is just what we do. And so I'm really excited about the work that Dave and Meredith and the curriculum teams are doing. And I'm particularly excited to take a look at some of our existing practices and really peel back and say, why are we doing some things? Like, we still have a term paper in 11th grade. So why are we doing the term paper? What is the function of that term paper? What is the function of doing more discrete writing units in other grade levels? And when do we really start teaching, scientific writing, and when do we start teaching analytical writing and doing real research projects as a way to get kids to make their thinking overt in writing?
And so much of that, Dr. Yanni, is what's going to guide a lot of our professional learning in the spring, because the area that we need the most focus on right now in our blended learning practice is that student assessment, student self-reflection, student feedback as part of the communication with the teacher. And so what does teacher feedback look like? So if a teacher is grading the rough draft of a paper, and then the students make the corrections and then turn that in as a final draft, and now the teacher reads that again and gives, in some cases, the same feedback. That feedback in isolation, as we mentioned last month, is not best practice. And so, there are websites like Grammarly that students can actually put their essays into to get those grammar editing comments immediately. And so not waiting for the teacher to give that back, but to see, oh, I messed up some of my punctuation, or I failed to use my citations, or I have too much passive voice. And they can change that immediately as they're working. And to Ms. Ianetti's question earlier, that flexible pace. So I'm ready to put that assignment through the editing stage, but the person next to me may not. And what we often do is everybody gets that same deadline, and then everybody waits for all of that feedback to come back in a couple of days. So I think that work is going to transform, I think, what our classes look like as well when we think about writing. So thank you all, appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman and Ms. Penner. I think the next item on the agenda are the legislative updates. Dr. Yanni?
Yes, thank you. While Ms. Evans is pulling that document up, I want to just briefly review with the committee and the remainder of the board some highlights from some House and Senate bills that will have, in some cases, an indirect, but in other cases, real direct impact on what it is that we do, the work of schools. So House Bill 1962 is going to be requiring SERS and PSERS. So we all know PSERS is our Pennsylvania School Employees Retirement System, and SERS is the state employees retirement system. They're now going to be required to do a stress test every year and submit the results of the stress test for their accounting to the governor, the General Assembly, and the independent fiscal office. This will be a little bit of a change. Each year when we start putting together our budget, we make some assumptions based upon the information that we get from the state about what the PSERS rate is going to be every year. And we know that there have been over the years points where the PSERS fund has been underfunded by the state. And so I think we're all looking forward to seeing the results of these stress tests so that we can see the return on investment for each of these accounts. One of the things that I think we need to be or need to have our eyes wide open about is this may result in some changes in legislation where the PSERS rate and contributions for districts actually go up. So I just wanted to bring this to everyone's attention, and it's something that we'll monitor closely as we go through this budget process and then in future years. Senate Bill 1216 includes some information. I'm not going to read this entire document, but basically what's one of the core premises of Senate Bill 1216 really takes a look at keystones and PSSAs. And it says that if the United States Department of Education allows states to file for waivers, to not have to do state assessments, now, because of Senate Bill 1216, our Pennsylvania Secretary of Education will have the ability to apply for those waivers. it remains to be seen if those waivers will come. We know in the next couple of months we will have a new Secretary of Education. We don't know yet who that person will be and what the priorities will be for that person when she or he assumes office. But if there are waivers offered by the USDOE, our state has the ability now to apply for those waivers. And so if we get those waivers, there will not be PSSAs or Keystones this year. If there is not the chance to get those waivers, or if our waiver is denied, we will be giving the PSSAs and the Keystones, but we will not be able to use the Keystones as a graduation requirement until the 22-23 school year. And I'll remind the committee and the board and whoever is listening, there is still the big question about, does the state have the necessary funds available for scoring the Keystone assessments? And basically the same thing with the PSSAs. So I would assume that following the inauguration in January and the installment and approval of a new Secretary of Education, we will soon be hearing much more about what will transpire with the PSSAs and the Keystones. As part of that Senate bill, if school districts were transporting non-public students prior to the shutdown last year, districts will have to continue to bus non-public students, even if the public school is no longer busing students. So had this piece of legislation been in effect earlier this year, even though we were not open for in-person instruction and not transporting our own students, we would have still had to transport our non-public students. This also guarantees that we will get transportation subsidy, but just as a reminder that transportation subsidy is received a calendar year after the services are rendered. The Secretary of Education also is permitted to waive the NIMS and the NOCTI assessments. So for our students who attend the Eastern Center for Arts and Technology, there is a chance that those industry specific assessments will be waived again this year. And in probably in January or February, we will have Dr. Plesnarski from Eastern, the executive director, attend both our finance committee meeting and one of our education committee meetings to talk about what's going on over at Eastern. The state is also providing some really good flexibility, giving some more latitude and runway for prospective teachers that are becoming certified in special education to be able to get a pre-K to 8 or a 7 through 12 special education certification. And that's because there is a real shortage of highly qualified special education teachers in the state at this time. And that's obviously not an area where we want to see a deficit in the number of folks that can be hired. They are also giving some latitude with prospective teachers not having access to the praxis tests that allow them to gain certification. So waiving some of those requirements so that prospective teachers can become gainfully employed, and then within their first year of their teaching career be able to take those assessments. And finally, we talk a lot about professional learning for our professional and administrative staff, but our paraprofessionals, for example, our educational assistants who work in our special education programs are required every year to receive 20 hours of targeted professional development to build their capacity in their respective positions. And the state realized, because of the shutdown last year, not all of our educational assistants and other paraprofessionals across the state were able to get all of their hours. So they're giving districts and paraprofessionals a little bit more latitude this year and allowing the rest of this year to be able to gain those hours. Not all districts make it easy for their paraprofessionals to get these hours. We do. We actually build time into our calendar because we feel so strongly that professional learning is really critical for everyone, including our paraprofessionals, that we make sure that they get those hours while they're with us. And in many cases, right alongside the teachers that they support during the school year. So this document is linked to the agenda. It will also go up on our website. And as we get any more information about some other pending legislation that's out there, we will keep the Education Committee and the board fully informed because of the impact it has on what we do.
All right, thank you, Dr. Yanni. Are there any questions from the board? I'm not seeing any. All right, then we'll move on to item 6 on the agenda, which is the representational consent. And I think, Dr. Yanni, that's yours again. Right?
I'm actually going to let Mr. Hoffman speak to that.
All right.
Now, I'm going to introduce it and then ask Dr. Perez actually to talk through it a little bit. So it's a team effort. And Ms. Penner, I know, contributed as well. So this is, the consent is typically something that we put on the agenda in June, I believe. But because there were so many uncertainties about what College Board was going to do, what state assessments situation was going to be, we hit the pause button on this. Now we were, a few weeks ago realizing, well, now we need to get prepared in terms of getting dates and windows and books and such ordered. And now some of that's shifting again, of course. So we would much rather have this at least with the dates and the specifics to you. But Dr. Perez, do you want to give an overview of what this is?
Sure, it helps to unmute. So the document that's in front of you or that is posted in board docs, lists state assessments as well as district assessments that are given. And in general, we're not talking about the teacher-made tests or end of unit tests, things like that. It's more of the standardized testing that is done across the district. So we begin and we include descriptions of each of those for your benefit, including the PASA, which is the alternative assessment, PSSA keystones, and have included the testing windows for that so that we're all aware of what that is and when they will be assessed. We're included in there as well the WIDA assessment, which, all of these, depending on whether we're virtual or in person, are going to be a little challenging to give. The WIDA assessment is something that may prove to be a little more challenging because some of those tests are given in close proximity because you're working with the student doing, speaking and listening kinds of tasks with them. The NAEP, which is typically referred to as the Nation's Report Card, we were scheduled to have that administered this year at Jarretttown. However, this week, NAEP announced that they're postponing all testing until 2022. But that is still there for the record to show that we were going to give it. And so it's there for that purpose as well. And then district-wide kindergarten screenings that we do for our students. There were some screenings administered in the fall of 2020 when students returned. PSAT, advanced placement exams, of course, and then of course our standardized test for ability and kind of giftedness, that work that is listed there as well. Of course, we don't know what the status of some of these exams are going to be based on where we are with COVID and being in person. If we are going to be giving the Keystone exams and the PSSAs, we are really going to have to think through some of those pieces in terms of how does that work with some of our students being virtual and we'll, test security and having those students that are in our Cardinal Academy or working virtually, coming into the building to take those exams rather than taking them at home where test security could be a problem. So those are some of the challenges as school districts we're going to have to work through if indeed we do not get waivers for those exams from USDOE. Any questions, or Ms. Penner, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think from what you're listing here, this is not unique to Upper Dublin. I think this is statewide and
Yep,
actually
it's pretty
countrywide.
standard.
Right.
Yep.
So, do you expect that the what is it, the PSATs, that they are going to be happening? Because that's a pretty close date.
So the date is January 26th.
Yeah.
And that's the makeup date that we are planning
Okay.
to administer. We, as back to our 4 pillars of practice, the health and safety, each of these groups that develop the tests and others, they have, in some cases, their own health and safety plans that we must implement when we give their assessment, in addition to our own. And so what that's causing us to really have to examine is space, proctors, schedules, times, transportation. So we just met this week on January 20, regarding the PSAT on January 26th, and the high school will be putting out some information about that once we get a few more details worked out tomorrow morning, actually.
Yeah, so this is clearly work in progress, and dates may shift, or years, or by a year in some cases, it sounds like.
You're on mute, Mrs. Sherpier.
Oh, thank you. I believe we need to move this on to the legislative agenda.
Yes.
So we'll do that, and that gets us to community input. So if there's anybody in the community who wants to speak, can you please raise your hand, and then I will ask Ms. Evans to monitor and invite or let people in one at a time. I see Ms. Catala. So go ahead.
Ms. Vitella.
Hi, Jenny Vitella, Ambler. I don't know if Mr. Hayden's still on this call, but I have to give him a little shout out. It is literally my son's favorite class with him, although he is not a big fan of the new updates this year with this new program. He really liked Eclipse. He liked working on his computer. He doesn't like that he has to find finding the errors. So it was kind of interesting to hear Mr. Hayden's side of this entire switch over. My question on that, and I think you answered Ms. Sherpier's question in regard to how this coding, because it's still Java, it's just through a different platform versus Eclipse, and so it really does translate and into any other program in the future that you are learning the same language. I'm assuming that is a correct statement. And also, as far as AP, I guess it was able to be modified accordingly to make it, obviously it's AP qualified class. I guess that didn't have any, I guess I'm trying to understand what had to be managed or changed in order to continue it to be an AP class, or nothing at all. And I guess my other question on that was, oh my gosh, I've lost it. I'm so sorry. Oh, well, maybe I'll come back to it. Oh, I'm so sorry. I lost my notes. And then we didn't mention at all, are we really going back to school on Monday, hybrid situation, and our school sports starting as well at that time? I think that's all. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I wish I could find what my note was about this program. Oh, I know what it is. I'm sorry. My son seems to indicate that one of the things about the class now for computer science is that he gets less of Mr. Hayden, which was one of his prime reasons he liked it. And I don't know if that's because we're virtual, or if that's because of it's more kind of taught via the system that we're using, the Code HS, versus the way it was used for Eclipse. I guess he's not feeling he gets as much Mr. Hayden interaction, but that might just be virtual. And so I was just curious if something changed along those lines. Thank you.
All right. I'm not seeing any other hands. Oh, yes. Miss Burns. Brooke, can you let Miss Burns in?
Go ahead, Ms. Burns.
Hi, thank you. Lisa Burns from Fort Washington. I had a couple questions in regards to the dashboard that came out in the Touch Base Tuesday, and I just wanted to understand if Dr. Yanni could possibly clarify. He mentioned that he'll be adding a new tracker to the dashboard starting on the 7th. So I just wanted to understand what that was. And then number two, I just wanted some clarification out of the 15 active cases that are currently on there. What are the actual number of active cases for students and staff that are in the building? I mean, I know we're not in the building now, but there is a differentiation within that dashboard. And I think that will help the community understand just how many active cases are in the actual each individual building. When I quickly looked at it, like for example, on the dashboard, the high school says 22, but that's definitely not the number if I'm looking at that correctly. I believe that's a cumulative number. And wanted to just understand what the actual in-building number is, if we could understand that. And I'm sorry if I've looked at that incorrectly. My other point was just that back to the hybrid, and now that we're moving forward with our original hybrid plan and we can get back on the saddle, what is our plan for getting the high school and middle school back to 5 full days? We've all been watching the news. I'm not going to get into any of what we need to, why we need to get these kids back into school. We all know why. So what metrics do we need to meet to get these high school and the middle school kids to 5-day? Our kids and the community absolutely need a strong plan that shows that the board and the administration are thinking about the future and how we're going to get these kids back into school. The hybrid model is not sustainable and we're failing our children. We need the school board to lead us and to give us some hope that we will get back. You know, I've said this many, many times, and I'm going to keep on saying it, that this community and these kids, these students are barely hanging on. We've had times to do different things, but now we've got to get back in the saddle and we got to get a plan in place and we got to figure out what's coming down the pike. So please, can we have some kind of response either tonight on this call or quickly in the near future, an email or something to the community about what the future holds and what the 5-day plan is. You know, I understand that plans have to change and shift, but a plan is a future thinking, and a plan at least is hope, you know, that there's light at the end of the tunnel, and it keeps people hanging on. And right now we have a lot of people that are literally hanging on by their fingertips. So I'm just asking if you could please communicate that ASAP to everybody, students and parents and guardians in the community as soon as you can. Thank you.
All right. I'm not seeing any more hands, so I'm going to close community input. And I'm going to ask if anybody wants to respond, comment on any of the questions. I don't think Mr. Hayden is with us anymore, but maybe Mr. Sirota.
Or Mr. Hoffman might be able to address some of the computer science questions. If not, we can absolutely make sure that those answers get posted.
I can answer the computer science question if Dave can't, but let's let Dave take it.
I think I can, but Mr. Schrader, go ahead if you want to.
Sure. The question was, is it the same programming language? And yeah, Java is the same programming language either way, no matter which development environment you're programming in. To clarify, Eclipse, which was the old environment, is called an IDE, Integrated Development Environment. It's the tool that you use to write the program. It is not the programming language. And similarly, the new tool is a different IEE. So, you know, if you worked in a large company, they would standardize not only on a programming language, but on a development environment. And so there are two separate things that you're effectively learning there, but the AP test only tests the language, not the development environment. I think that should cover the part that it's appropriate for me to cover.
Yes, and you knew all the fancy words. The English teacher wasn't going to have all of those words. So I would take back to the English example. I'm sorry, to the AP example. AP sets the standards and the skills for the curriculum the teachers implement. So not every school uses the same book for a biology course, for example. Not every math class uses the same, books for an AP Calc class. So these are, as Mr. Hayden mentioned, the learning management systems, and they have Code HS is rich in that it has a lot of already teacher created and system created materials that are aligned to various courses. But teachers are also able to supplement. And with Mr. Hayden's experience, he's able to capitalize on that. In terms of access to teacher, Mr. Hayden is still Mr. Hayden, and we're really proud he's here. So if ever a student's feeling like they don't have access to a teacher or something feels off, I would first recommend talking to the teacher, reaching out to the teacher, and then reaching out to a counselor and administrator in the building if that still feels like it's a concern. Our teachers are always willing to help our students.
I'm happy to address the dashboard. So cumulative total of cases in the district, 48, 15 active, 33 inactive. As a point of reference, the Montgomery County Office of Public Health suggests that districts that have put together dashboards after 10 days, cases are moved from active to inactive or recovered. The purpose of the tracker that will be added to the dashboard next week is once we are back in school, the new parameters that we are required to follow is that in rolling 14-day periods, once you meet certain thresholds based upon the site of your school, there are a series of actions that need to get or that need to be taken per the attestation that we signed and submitted to the Department of Education. So what that tracker will do will actually provide greater clarity of the number of active cases or the number of cases in a building starting on the 7th of December and moving forward. One of the issues that, or one of the reasons why a full plan for 5-day instruction has not come out yet is that PDE just released these parameters. In fact, they made a few changes yesterday in terms of removing language about household contacts, and also being that we are a school district in a county with a health department, we have a little bit more leeway to work directly with the health department on some of the matters about closure and reverting back to virtual instruction. I would say no later than the legislative meeting in December, we will publish a plan, but I have to be very clear when I say that 5-day-a-week instruction is not going to be a reality in the months of December, January, February, and even March, because when you look at the charts that we have put in, the Touch Base Tuesday last week and again this week, once you have a number of cases in your building, the first thing you have to do is de-densify the building. Now, we've already taken care of de-densifying buildings by having the Cardinal Academy at the elementary level and the hybrid schedule at the secondary level. And we're very grateful to our Cardinal Academy families at the elementary because they have helped us tremendously de-densify the building. And, when there is a case in a school, in a classroom or in a cafeteria or whatever setting you're in, there are a number of close contacts that have to be identified and quarantined. And the more kids we put in a room, the more close contacts that there will be and the more quarantining that will happen. I am cautiously optimistic by what we're hearing about vaccines, but I don't want to give anyone the false impression that 5-day-a-week instruction is, in-person instruction is on the immediate horizon. But we will put out that plan. We're actually going to put out that plan in conjunction with other districts in the county. So by the legislative meeting, it will be there. But I do again want to thank our families at the elementary level who have opted for Cardinal Academy. And I will say, while we have heard some consternation about the hybrid schedule and how students are performing inside that hybrid schedule, I don't want it to get lost on anyone that we are also hearing good things from families and from students themselves. And our counselors and social workers are available for assistance whenever families need them. So if there are students who are struggling, and if they don't come up in one of our student assistance processes, parents should continue to reach out and access assistance from their counselor. And we'll make sure in next week's Touch Base Tuesday, we will continue to put contact information for the counselors in those communications.
All right, thank you, Dr. Yanni. Any other comments from the board? Dr. Lovinowitz, go ahead.
Yeah, just feedback on Dr. Yanni's comments. I wanted to thank Dr. Yanni for the actions that we've taken in terms of bringing back K5 full-time and the hybrid. If you look at many of the districts in our region, they're still closed. And maybe just a handful are bringing back K5. So we've been able to find a solution to bring back as many students as we can. And I fully support the actions that the leadership team has come up with. And I'm proud of the work that we've been doing here in Upper Dublin.
All right, thank you. Any other comments? All right, then I'm going to encourage people to keep wearing masks, keeping social distances, because we can keep schools open as long as we don't reach those magic numbers of active cases. So if we all do our best on that, then hopefully we can keep our kids in school and move forward. I'd like to let you know that the upcoming Education Committee meeting will be in January 6th. And I think that gets us to the end of our agenda. And I'd like to adjourn the meeting. Thank you all very much and stay healthy and see you next time. Good night.
Come on.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Night.
Good night.
Thank you.